And all I could think immediately was, girl, you said that that other girl was porcelain colored. How are they paler than porcelain? Really? Seriously. Get better adjectives about skin, y'all. Don't use food, and don't use absurd things that don't make sense.
Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. Get lost in Fˮŭ̌k, the legend and the myth. Learn about Bella. Understand her life and personality. What made her who she is. Take a deep dive with me, Blue in Flight.
Okay. I forgot to tell you who I was. Hi, I'm Blue. Thanks for coming around. If you like what you see here and what you learned, give us a follow at the end of the video. It'll be a lot of fun to have you around. Thanks. Let's get back to it. I'm back, and I'm mostly sober. So I've got lots of thoughts and lots of things that I'd like to talk about. I thought I'd be able to cover this book with 3 chapters in one 30-minute video, but that's definitely not going to happen. It was wild of me to think so. This script is about 6,000 words from front to beginning, and I think the video is going to be like an hour long. So this is definitely going to be a 1 chapter per video series for now. I'd like to start this off with, I love Twilight. I hope that I love Twilight when this video series is over. Twilight makes me nostalgic for a time when I read it, which I had a couple of little toddlers at home and I had hours to like dedicate to reading while they played, and just, you know, you can overall watch kids and read at the same time, so it was easy. And it also makes me nostalgic to like being 15 years old, 14 years old, because I feel like that's what Bella reminds me of, right? So this is a labor of love. I couldn't go through the process of taking notes and writing the script and filming this for the 5th time and then editing it down all into videos that you guys are now watching if I didn't love this series, if it didn't make me happy to like, just if I wasn't so into it that I wanted to dissect it into a million things. Now, the last time I read this book was 16 years ago. It was July of 2008. A friend sent me the book. I picked it up. I read the first page and a half. I had to put it down because I had kids, so I had stuff I had to take care of. On the 21st of July, I picked it up again. By the 24th, I had gone back to the bookstore twice to pick up the sequels and was eagerly awaiting the release of Breaking Dawn, which was right around the time of my birthday. I'm not sure exactly when. August 2nd, 2008. So 2 days before my birthday, I went to a release party dressed with a tank top that I had stenciled Team Edward on, and bought the book, participated in the Barnes & Noble's like fun things. Like I did a what are they called? A scavenger hunt, and I talked to a couple of moms about like the realities of the book and like what to talk to their kids about, because I was like 25. Maybe 27, I can't remember. I'll put the real number over here. And then I stayed up all night reading it. So I love these books, right? And now that it's 16 years later and my daughter, who was 1 at the time, is 17, it makes me look a little more critically at the adults and the people around them, because that's the role that I'm in now. So that's maybe, I think, a good heavy focus is going to be on the adults in this story and how they're acting and what they're doing and how they affect everything else that's going on. It's going to be super fun. All right. So settle in, y'all. I had a big old bowl of the devil's lettuce and I read Twilight, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to give you a blow by blow of what happened this chapter and this in the preface and in the chapter. So if you don't want that, go ahead and jump to this timestamp, right? It's going to be a big like numbers here that are going to have the timestamp for when you get my thoughts and commentary and opinions and suggestions on the whole chapter. You'll find everything about me there. If you'd like to go and read the chapter yourself instead of listen to my summary and then come back and think about what I have to say, that would be awesome. Just leave me a comment, say, hey, I'm ready to go, I'm gonna go read it, and then I'll be back for your summary, and then jump to there. Up to you. Right now, we're doing the summary of the whole preface and chapter 1. So let's go. All right, so I'm gonna be doing some like reading here. A couple of spots I accidentally left things out, so I'll be filling them in, but mostly I'm gonna be reading, so forgive me for looking off camera so much. I try not to do it. I try to look at you guys as much as possible because I feel like this is a discussion that I want to have with you and not just like, you know, a lecture or something like that. So we're going to start with the preface, and does it have a name, or is it just called preface? Preface. Okay, so right before this, on the very front page, there's a Bible quote, and it says, "But out of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." So right off, we get like, you know, Bible stuff. Don't learn this information or you're gonna die. And then you get the preface.
I'd never given much thought to how I would die.
Where basically Bella begins talking about how she never thought that her life would end up here. And she never thought that she would die this way. And she's staring at the room across from the killer, who is a hunter with dark eyes, who's staring back at her pleasantly, right? She decides in that moment that if dying in the place of someone you love is a noble thing, and she doesn't care if coming to Foursquare is what led to her death, she would always come back to Foursquare. She would always do it in every choice, because she was given this like life that she didn't even know she dreamed of, and now she's not going to complain and whine that it's over. She's going to face her death. And at that moment, the hunter smiles and walks toward her. And that's the preface. That's where it leaves you. So the next chapter is chapter 1, the first sight. Now, Bella is at the airport with her mother, and they are saying their goodbyes. Bella's mother says to her, "Bella, you don't have to do this," for like the 1000th time after the car ride there, where she had spent some time on the car ride, like mourning the son. And it immediately sends Bella into a panic, looking at her mother's like childlike eyes, right? And she reminds herself that Phil is there for gas, food, bills, and directions whenever her mother gets lost. And she'll be okay. And she tells her mom, "I want to go," but she tells us that it's a lie. And her mother says, "Well, say hi to Charlie for me." Charlie is her dad. She then tells her mother, "I'll be all right. Everything will be fine. It'll be great. I love you." Gives her a hug, turns around, and walks on the plane. Nothing more is said. While she's flying, she thinks about Charlie and how open he is to the idea of her moving there, and how just generally how agreeable and excited he is. When she arrives in Port Angeles, they share an awkward car ride to Foursquare's home. It's about an hour. And Bella's kind of bratty because Charlie's found this vehicle that he likes for her, but she doesn't know. She's very suspicious. And she seems ungrateful until she finds out she doesn't have to pay for it like she thought, and he already bought it for her. So they finally get home, and she absolutely loves it. And they bring her things upstairs, and Charlie leaves her to pack, which is a grace for her because she spends some time getting introspective about not fitting in at school and starts dreading it. And she sheds some tears while she's looking out over into the rain. The next morning, it's a foggy, quiet morning, and she has a chill breakfast with Charlie where they don't talk. She then spends some time sitting in the kitchen after he leaves and reminisces and reflects on the fact that the house hasn't changed since her mother left it. But she doesn't really indulge any of those emotions and instead heads early to class so that she can figure out where she's going and what she's doing. Now, when she gets in, the truck is clean, but it does smell like smoke and peppermint, and the engine is very loud, but the radio works, which makes her very happy, although it is raining. When she arrives at school, it's very easy for her to figure out where to go and what to do with the help of the secretary in the office, but the woman recognizes her and probably knows her history, but doesn't ask any questions, nothing personal, just treats her like an everyday student coming into class. Afterwards, she follows the other kids to school, the parking where the students go, and memorizes the map to her first class, which she manages to get to safely. She gets placed in the back of the seat after being introduced to the class, not introducing herself. And then she's relieved to notice that most of the stories that are on the reading list for this English class, which I'm assuming is English, they don't directly say, most of the literature she's read before. And it's comforting to know that it's nothing new, but also a little challenging. She wanted something challenging, so it's a little frustrating. But she reminisces and figures maybe she could get her mother to send her old essays so that she doesn't have to write them again. And she gets into fictitious argument in her head with her mother about whether or not it's cheating. And this continues until the bell rings when another student, Eric, Bella might as well have called him Nerdy McNerd because of the way she describes him. He introduces himself and he walks her to government class, which is her next class. After that is trig and then Spanish. Now, most of the day passes without incident, except for in trigonometry, where the teacher forces her to stand up in front of the class and introduce herself, which she finds humiliating. After that, the kids get a little more bold and start asking her questions, and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. Next, she walks with a girl who was in both her trigonometry and her Spanish class, both class 3 and class 4, and they go to the lunchroom where more students batter her with more questions. And again, in one ear and out the other. They ask, she answers, she forgets. They ask, the answers, she forgets. Her friend from Spanish and trig talks to her and tells her who people are. She forgets who they are immediately. Eric waves at her from across the room and she waves back. But only when she sees the Cullens does she fixate. She does spend quite a bit of time looking at them. They aren't looking at her. None of them are looking at anybody, so she can kind of get away with it for a little while and feels comfortable doing so. She asks her friend from trig and Spanish who they are, and she gets into this kind of like gossipy thing about the living arrangements. All of their names are Edward and Ellett and Alice Cullen and Rosalie and Jasper Hale. And they're all adopted or fostered by Dr. Cullen and his wife. In this moment, she remembers that her friend is Jessica, and she gossips about how 4 of them are like dating each other. Emmett is dating Rosalie, and Jasper is dating Alice. Rosalie and Jasper are twins, but they are dating people who are not related to each other. And this is what Jessica admits after a little while, and that even though it's very, very scandalous, it's all really fine because none of them are related to each other. And while Bella doesn't appreciate her scrutiny of these people, she does admit that it would be quite a hot topic in Phoenix as well. Bella implies that it's very nice of the Cullens to take in all these kids that need them, and Jessica dismisses Mrs. Cullen's kindness by saying that she thinks that she can't have children, and Bella takes affront to that, but she doesn't say anything to Jessica. Instead, she's still focused on the Cullens, and she notices that while none of them are looking at each other, they're also not eating. And she asks Jessica if they've been here forever, because she's curious that she hasn't seen them in the first 14 years that she came here. And no, she learns from Jessica that they did indeed move here 2 years ago from somewhere in Alaska. And Bella recognizes that despite their beauty, which clearly sets them apart from everyone else, there's still outsiders. They're not set apart in a good way. It's in a you don't belong kind of way. And then she gets a little focused and she says, she asks about the one with the bronze hair, the youngest. The one that looks the youngest. And she learns from Jessica that he does not date, but her tone makes Jessica seem like she got rejected, and Bella turns away and hides a smile so she doesn't have to hide the fact that she thinks it's funny that maybe it's not that he doesn't date, he just doesn't date her. While she's looking away and hiding her smile, she notices that Edward is smiling as well. So Alice leaves and then the Cullens leave, and Bella stays with Jessica and her friends and mulls over what she's learned while kind of trying to listen vaguely to the conversation that's going on around her. But she begins to get anxious about being late for biology, and so she walks there with another new friend, Angela, who, like her, is shy. Now, it turns out there's only one seat left in bio, and that is next to Edward Cullen, and this turns out to be disastrous. So she walks by him to here to get her slip signed, and he stiffens when she does so. And the entire time she's keeping an eye on him, and his eyes are full of anger and hatred. And she ends up tripping on her way back to her seat. And when she catches herself, it's all she can think about is how black his eyes are. Not dark, just black like coal. He covers his nose and tightens his fist and acts like she stinks, which makes her check her hair. Now it smells like strawberries, and it gets on her nerves that he's acting this way, so she decides to ignore him and tries to use her hair as like the curtain between her and the next person. Although she does peek through it quite a bit to check on him, and his demeanor never changes. When the bell rings, he is the first one to the door, beating everyone there. Annoyed, frustrated, and embarrassed by Edward's behavior, Bella is not prepared for another student, Mike, to come up and introduce himself. But she thinks he's cute and discovers that he's from California as well, and they share some love of the sun together. They find out they have gym next, so they walk to class together, and he lets her know that Edward's behavior was very out of character and even accuses her of doing something to him. She says that she never even spoke to him, and Mike tells her that Edward's weird anyway, and then spends the rest of the walk flirting with her. They part ways. Coach gives her an outfit for the next gym classes, and she gets to sit this one out. And she spends the entire time watching 4 different games of volleyball and remembering all of the injuries that her clumsiness has caused both herself and others, some of them making her a little nauseous even. And that's all she does all class. Finally, it's the end of the day, and she's trying to turn in her slip, the signed paperwork that all the teachers have agreed that she's been in class. And when she steps outside, she notices that while the rain is gone, it is very cold. And she looks, she heads into the office where it's a lot warmer. But she sees Edward standing there, and she can hear him arguing with the office secretary about changing biology classes. Someone comes through the door behind her, bringing cold wind with it, and Edward turns and stiffens and glares directly at her with so much hate that she almost gets scared. She gets scared for a minute. And it fades almost immediately when he turns back around and talks nicely to the secretary and tells her that, like, I'll deal with it. It'll be fine. I'm sorry to have caused you any problems. Thank you for helping. And then he just leaves. Bella, frustrated and upset, feeling like she's been slighted by this kid for no reason whatsoever, just turns in her paperwork and heads back to her truck, which she's already begun to see as a solace. She sees it as a safe haven, and she gathers her thoughts there. And even still, when she's heading back to Charlie's place, which she still hasn't called home, she's fighting tears. Now, that's it. That's the end of the chapter. I tried to keep it as succinct as possible. I'll talk about what I thought and what I liked about it at the very end, but right now, we're going to move on to my thoughts and things. Okay, so as I've said before, I have thoughts and I have feelings. So, when I went into this, I had a pen, the book itself, some highlighters, some sticky tabs, and a notebook for taking notes. Smoked a bowl, read the first chapter, came out of it with 25 sticky tabs and a page and a half of notes. Did the same thing again, came out of it with 35 points and 6.5 pages of notes. And now I have this. So what you'll see here is a fully annotated book with lots of tabs, lots of different additions, things that can move, right? Pages that are just filled with all of my thoughts, highlights, things I like and enjoy, including the very last page, which has a little black notebook. I like the white pen on the dark paper. I think it looks really cool. So, I talk about a few things. I have a few tabs, as I said. These are not the ones that I didn't put these here when I was reading. These were put here on the third read through when I had all my notes down and I was rearranging and adding the annotations. So on the side here, I am tracking every time Bella worships the sun, every time she notices it's raining, and every time that she, falls. Okay, because I think those 3 things are going to be very telling for her mental health, but also I think it's funny that she falls. And on the top here, I'm keeping track of who is around and when they show up or when they're spoken about. So I have Renee, or I have Charlie, I have Renee, I have her friends from school, I have people from the Cullen family, people from La Push, this blank space is for Jacob, and then this is for Edward. And so this is going to be, if I end up doing all 4 books, this is the format that I'll stay in. Unless more and more things feel like tracking. You know, I've got some thoughts and stuff, and we're gonna get into those. But right now, I'm just looking forward to doing the first book, seeing how that goes. It's gonna be 22 videos because of 1 video a chapter. Some of them are probably gonna be shorter than others, and that's okay. But I'm excited to get into it. So let's move on to sun worship.
I would miss Phoenix. I'd miss the heat.
The very first and most important thing we learn about Bella is that she loves the sun to the extent that she considers wearing her white sleeveless eyelet tank top as a gesture of mourning. It's literally she's wearing it as a farewell gesture to the sun and carrying on a parka for the weather when she gets to Foursquare. It's very telling about the kind of personality that we're supposed to be presented, right? According to the Twilight lexicon, which as far as I understand has direct evidence from the books, this takes place in mid-January 2005, which blew my mind because it was published in September of 2005. And I really am not used to books being published in the same year that they're set. So it was interesting that she either wrote in the future or just wrote it in present day and then retroactively applied the dates. Regardless, it's super fun and really cool because that's kind of where I'm imagining it anyway. I feel like the movie really captured 2000s aesthetic really well. We're gonna move on to the next issue of Sun Worship, which is on page 10. And we get another homage to Phoenix and the sun. Bella is standing in the mirror giving us the first person POV obligatory. This is exactly how I look like detailed description. And we actually don't get a super detailed description about what she looks like, more what she doesn't look like, right? She's thinking about how she should look tan, sporty, blonde, all the things that go with living in the Valley of the Sun. But instead she finds herself ivory skinned without even the excuse of blue eyes or red hair. She goes on to describe that she's so clumsy she injures nearby people as well as herself, and describes herself in this situation as slender but soft somehow, obviously not an athlete. Lots of, really looking down on herself in this specific section, which is a little sad to see. Now, I want to pause for a second because she says that she's ivory skinned, and this leads me kind of into another description that she gives herself. And this is what I like to call a what moment, because I'm really trying to figure out what the author is doing here and trying to break down what is happening. So she's trying to describe Bella as very pale, and what she ends up doing while she's looking herself in the mirror and critiquing herself is that she notices that her complexion is sallow and that she needs color to make it pop, and that there's no color in Foursquare. And it's first, girl, learn makeup. Most people have to enhance their features with contouring of some kind to make their self look colorful, because our culture today has taught us that a face without makeup is actually a faded, non-normal, sickly face. And so just learn to do some makeup and that will help, I promise. Or go outside, because the next thing that she says is, my skin could be pretty. It was very clear, almost translucent looking. And I see translucent looking and I'm my first thought this go around is, immediately I'm worried for her vitamin D intake. How much sun is she getting? Is she drinking whole milk, right? Because a vitamin deficiency, I looked it up and it's no joke. Now, I'm going to be showing you some images that correlate with what I'm going to be reading and telling you. So just follow along and do your best. I've gone to the National Institutes of Health Office of Dietary Supplements Division for information on the people who are more likely to have a vitamin D deficiency, because this is what I think Bella has. And what happens if you don't get enough vitamin D, and the effects of the vitamin D deficiency on your bone and muscle health, because I think that all matters to this diagnosis of Bella. All right, so now before I get a little too far in, here's some information on how we measure vitamin D, which we do so. Okay, so we measure vitamin D on how many nanograms per milliliter are found in your blood. So if you care about what they measure, it's called 25-hydroxyvitamin D. And you can get as much of this as you need, anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, either daily or twice a week, all depending on like what your weather is like. You know, the index for heat, the index for the sun, UV, all that stuff. Pay very close attention to it, but you can get most of your needs met just naturally outdoors in a very short period of time, not very frequently. Now, what you need to aim for is around 50. Now, you won't know how much you have, right? If you get too high, you'll get 125. That's the cap for top, 125 nanograms per milliliter in your blood. And you probably have other problems if you've got 125. There's going to be lots of things that are going to suggest to you that you are very much spending too much time in the sun already. Your vitamin D is probably going to be the least of your worry if you're up at 125. But the low is actually as high as 30, and that's only 20 away from where your healthy aim is. There's not a real wiggle room. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that, you know, none is no good. A little tiny bit is okay. A little bit is much more. Quite a bit is probably too much, right? But quite a bit is still okay as long as you're using protection after about, I'd say, 15 minutes of exposure to the sun. Now, unless Bella's eating her healthiest diet, which there's a quote where she says, maybe it was the light, but I already looked sallower and unhealthy. And it could be the light, but it also could be a bad diet. You know, that doesn't happen in one day. She says that on page 10, and it doesn't lead me to believe that she eats very healthily. But she hasn't mentioned food yet, so I'm trying to not comment on it entirely too much. We know for sure if she's translucent skinned, she's probably not getting enough sun exposure, and she probably doesn't have enough vitamin D. Now, this here says that people who seldom expose their skin to the sunshine because they do not go outside or because they keep their body and head covered, as well as people who use very huge amounts of sunscreen, will have low vitamin D because those things will limit the vitamin D that your sun produces in response to being exposed to the sun's rays. Now, in teens and adults, vitamin D deficiency causes osteomalacia, which is a disorder that causes bone pain and muscle weakness. Now, I'm not saying that Bella has that, but she could be on her way to it. And here we see that muscles are also important for healthy bones because they help maintain balance and prevent falls. And a shortage of vitamin D may lead to weak and painful muscles. And if your muscles are weak, then you're more likely to fall. Now, so I think this is the reason that she's clumsy. Whether she's got a vitamin D deficiency or she's just not very good at humaning, that's something we'll talk about later, right? But like I said, it could be the light. Okay, so I wasn't going to put the what moments back to back because I kind of thought that it would be nicer to have them sprinkled, but there's a joke I really want to tell, and we'll get there in a minute. So the second what moment is on page 15, and we're heading into the first day of class, and she's feeling anxiety as she walks into class, and the first thing that she notices is that two of these girls are hanging up their coats, and she says that these two people that she's following were two girls, one a porcelain colored blonde, the other also pale with light brown hair. Now, beyond her penchant for high-fitting colors, which that's ivory skinned, translucent looking, porcelain colored, I know having read further through, there's red haired, bronze haired. It's like, either she really likes hyphens, which is fair. They do add a sense of diversity to the text, which is maybe something to consider. But either that or she's just autocorrect is telling her that there should be a dash between ivory and skinned so that we can make sure that we know exactly what we're talking about. So all of that aside, porcelain is a really weird way to describe somebody. Like porcelain skin, like that is white. That is like as white as my mouse was before it got like red makeup all over it, right? Like that's like people aren't that color. Anyway, so we'll finish up the sun worship now. The last one is that she's seen the Cullens and she's grilling her new friend, whose name she doesn't remember, about who they are. And in her mind, she's giving their beauty this very high praise, but it's specifically how their bodies look, right? And hold on, I'll find it. It's on page 18. What does she say? Muscled, serious weightlifter, dark curly hair. Taller, leaner, still muscular and honey blonde. Lanky, less buildy, untidy bronze-colored hair. More boyish than the others, in college, who all looked like they could be in college or teachers rather than students. The girls, tall, statuesque, beautiful figure, the kind you saw on the cover of Sports Illustrated, kind that made every girl take a hit to her self-esteem just by being in the same room. Golden, gently waving hair to the middle of her back. Short girl, pixie-like in the thin in the extreme, small features, hair deep black, cropped short, pointing in every direction. Like, she heavily describes their bodies, which is kind of a weird thing to focus on. But she also, in the next breath, throws shade to both them and Fårk's at the same time. It's on the same page, on page 18. She says, and yet they were all exactly alike. Every one of them was chalky pale, the palest of all the students living in this sunless town. And all I could think immediately was, girl, you said that other girl was porcelain colored. How are they paler than porcelain? Really, seriously, get better adjectives about skin, y'all. Don't use food, and don't use absurd things that don't make sense, right? There's plenty of like color words of actual colors that you could use, and there's like inanimate objects that aren't food, that don't have eating associated with them, that you can use, right? No one's caramel colored. No one's got milk colored skin. It's weird, okay? It creeps me out and I don't like it. And I know a lot of people who don't like it. It's be more. Sorry, rant over. But this is another example where she uses the bronze-haired boy, and after she notices that they're paler than everybody around, paler than porcelain, and that they have like these fantastic bodies, she then notices that they have these shadows under their eyes. And I think this is at the point where she is seduced by their beauty, right? From here on out, that is what like sinks her in. And I might even start keeping track of how much she talks about how pretty they are, right? I might go back now and figure out, like, let me make a note. What do I have that I can make a note on? I ain't got shit. That's about as much love as the sun gets here. There is a moment where she says that her and Mike share a love of the sun, but we don't actually like see or experience any of that with her. We don't know what it feels like. She tells you a number of times, and that is how much Bella hates Fårk's, right? Bella hates Fårk's. On page 5, we learn that Bella is thinking about Fårk's while traveling, and that Charlie knows that she hates Fårk's, which is why he's more than a little confused as to why she is coming to live with him, right? But he's clearly happy to have Bella back in his life, and he doesn't question it too much, to say the least. I mean, he bought her a truck. He made sure she had a working computer with the internet in her bedroom in 2005 as a 17-year-old. The trust this man had to have to be the chief of police and still allow that in his daughter's room. Wow. Right? Wow. So on the next page, they're in the middle of a conversation, and he's telling her how Billy Black from the reservation sold him the car, and he mentions that they used to go fishing together, and she doesn't respond. Her and Charlie don't look at each other the whole car ride. They just stare directly out the windows. But internally she realizes that she doesn't remember him because she does a good job of blocking out painful, unnecessary things and from her memory, right? And since Billy Black is a part of Fårk's, and Fårk's is not something she wants to remember at all or associate anything with at all. It's poof, gone. And then again, on the very next page again, on page 7, Charlie tells Bella that he got her card because he wants her to be happy in F<applause>ks. And she tells him that she appreciates it, but in her inner dialogue, she talks about the impossibility of her liking Forszák and how it'll never happen, but Charlie, it's okay for Charlie to live in the dark so he doesn't have to suffer along with her. Now, by this point, Charlie probably shouldn't know. She's literally just left home, got off the plane, she's depressed, she's feeling sad, it's raining, she misses the sun, she probably misses her mother even though she doesn't say that. She's more anxious about just being in Forszák. Just existing in Forszák is giving her this, like, sadness. For some reason, she just hates it. And I don't know, right? So her dad's just hoping that her having her own ride keeps her happy enough to stick around, because that's all that he wants. So she has a rough night, right? The next morning, she wakes up from school and she looks out the window and she sees that it's very foggy, and this begins to give her claustrophobic thoughts about Forszák being like a cage and the sky that you can never see is like the roof of it, right? And after having breakfast with Charlie, she starts thinking about her mother, and that made me wonder, like, how much of Bella hating Forszák is intrinsic to Bella and Forszák, and how much of it has to do with her mother? How much would she like Forszák if her mother hadn't made it clear that she doesn't? She told the story of herself leaving Charlie to Bella so many times that Bella recites it like a fairy tale on the very first page of chapter 1. She says, "It was from this town and its gloomy, omnipresent shade that my mother escaped with me when I was only a few months old. It was this town that I'd been compelled to spend a month every summer until I turned 14. Did Renee poison Bella against Forszák by treating her like a friend instead of a daughter, and a confidant instead of someone she was supposed to be taking care of, right? Or alternatively, which is very legit, did Bella just hate Forszák because she was meant to go there every summer, and while she had a good time with her dad when she was little, she doesn't remember a lot of it, and everything after that, she just missed everyone from home, she missed her mother, she missed her friends, she had to leave everything behind that she knew for a whole month and go states away to spend time with a man who probably worked most of the time and took her out to dinner every night. I don't know how much of it is what, but we do know that for whatever reason, Bella has a penchant of mentioning the rain and how often she sees it, and early here in the first chapter, it really does make her sad. I think it adds to her oppression, which is really good on Stephenie Meyer's part. I just wish that it was less Bella just telling us that it was raining and more the feel of the rain, the smell of the rain, the wetness that accumulates that you don't know is on you until you touch your face. Stuff like that. The afternoon that she leaves school, the first day, so like, I would say less than 24 hours, Bella notices the rain 6 times. She notices it when she arrives in Port Angeles. She notices it, or she mentions it when she talks to Charlie on the way home to his place after she arrives. She gets lost watching it when she cries that night, which was actually a really good way, but it still didn't really like evoke imagery. She can't sleep because of it. The first night at Charlie's house, it's too loud, then it fades to a drizzle. She notices it when she leaves for school the next morning, and she notices it when she's going from English to gym. Now, she does also not notice that it's not raining one time. At the very end of the chapter when she's going to get her paper slip turned in. Now, it's a very rainy town. Stephenie Meyer picked it because at the time that she was writing the story, it got the most rain out of every place in the United States. I remember reading that on her website. And the Pacific Northwest is known for being wet and warm and cold and wet, and mostly wet, except for in places where it's a desert in the Pacific Northwest where it's dry right next to the rainforesty stuff. But it's really hard for me to see why she made Bella dislike the trees in Forszák. Because having teenagers, knowing teenagers, there's nothing they like better in a car ride than a good distraction. And Bella doesn't notice any of them trees. She doesn't stare at anything out the window. And like every time I've ever had a teenager that didn't want to talk and we were in the car, their eyes were out the window and you knew they were watching the scenery and they didn't want anything to do with you. Not staring straight ahead like I'm looking at you guys, but like past you. Just like having a conversation with my dad, right? They're looking out the window. They're like tracing the rain as it falls down the plane. It just doesn't really make sense to me that Bella wouldn't notice any of that stuff, right? She's just like staring and oblivious. And it blows my mind because, like I said, she's not even looking at her dad when they're driving. She's not even looking anywhere close to where he would be. She's already looking out the windows and she doesn't see anything. And there's a lot of time that passes with Bella in this fashion where we don't experience life with her. She just kind of like fills us in. And very often it feels like a long diary entry instead of a lived experience, right? And I know it's because of the first person POV, but because she doesn't write it like we're inside Bella's head all the time, we can actually hear her, feel her, breathe with her in any way, shape, or form, especially in the first chapter so far. It doesn't feel real. So it's either written more like a long diary entry kind of early author thing, which is fair, or maybe Bella just tunes the fuck out, right? She just like zones out and like life happens around her and she's aware of it happening but not paying attention to literally any of it. So she's like just zoned out and tuned out all the fucking time. Like she's got this skill of just like zoning out maybe when her mother rattles at her, or maybe when she's got to call her dad and he doesn't know what to say so he just tells her everything, or maybe this is what she's talking about. She like has this non-connection to herself when it comes to like talking to other people in the world, right? When she says that like at one point, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but at one point she talks about how she has a hard time connecting. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe she can't focus on people or she can't bring herself to care. I'm not really sure, right? But it does raise the question of like, how much does it have to do with all the bad parenting, right? And boy, are we going to talk about Renee particularly and the bad parenting. Okay, so I know I had a big smile just then. It's like how you like grin and bear through the pain, right? Because Renee makes me angry in a lot of ways. And it starts with the very first page of the very first chapter. She's riding with her mother, and then the next page they get out on page 4, they're at the airport and she's reminding Bella for the nth time, Bella, you don't have to do this, right? And she's talking about Bella moving to Foursquare, and she's insinuating that Bella is doing this of her own free will, but she's not. Like, I feel like there's more there. I feel like she's got this silent for me hanging off of that. Because Bella, you don't have to do this for me is more likely to remind Bella of how bad her mom is by herself when she says me, which is more likely to send her into the spasm of panic that she has, and as she stared at her mother's wild, childlike eyes. And she has to actively remind herself that her loving, erratic, harebrained mother has Phil now. Phil can pay the bills. Phil can keep food in the pantry. Phil can keep gas in the car. Phil can be who she calls when she gets lost. Because remember, this is 2005. We had MapQuest and we had Google Maps. People didn't use smartphones for more than phoning and texting, right? And texting, it depended on if they were in your plan and all kinds of weird stuff. So not even everybody did it. She would be calling and asking for directions from somebody somewhere else trying to find out where she's at. And she has Phil to do that now. Bella doesn't have to do those things, right? And that frustrates me because Bella's having all this anxiety about having to let go of that. Like, how long has she been doing this? And how much has she been doing? Has she been doing all that? Has she been doing more? Right? And she just keeps on keeping on. Bella tells her that she wants to go. She lies to her about it. And she says, tell Charlie I said hi. Which makes me say, does she ever say your dad? Did she ever say, tell your dad I said hi? How was your dad on the phone? Does she ever say that? Or is it always just Charlie? Is it always just Charlie? And then right after that, she tells her mom not to worry and that she loves her. And Renee just hugs her back and then watches her leave. We don't get no I love you. We don't get no be safe. We don't get no call me back later. And unless Bella is an unreliable narrator, which I think might be able to be argued to an extent, just that she leaves shit out. Not necessarily that she lies, she just doesn't tell us everything. And she doesn't plan to or try to. But like, it's very possible Renee said she loved her when she left, but she doesn't tell us. And it leaves me wondering, like, if she said it, maybe Bella would have said it to us. And so the fact that it wasn't said means that she didn't say it. And that just feels really bad because this is like the last time she plans to see her kid, right? She said, I'll come back. Like, if you want to come back, I'll be there. I'll come back. Like, what does she say exactly? Let's look it up together. It's only in the first couple of pages, so it won't be hard to find. She says, tell Charlie I said hi. I will. I'll see you soon, she insisted. You can come home whenever you want. I'll come right back as soon as you need me. But I could see the sacrifice in her eyes behind the promise. Don't worry about me, I urged. I'll be great. I love you, Mom. She hugged me tightly for a minute, and then I got on the plane and she was gone. So she doesn't say she loves her back, and she actually like doesn't even try to hide the fact that she'll be giving up something big to come back as soon as Bella needs her, right? And that frustrates me. It does, because I don't know, I'm a mom, I guess. So we do get the answer to the dad question like later on when Bella is in the car with Charlie, and we realize that Renee has called him Charlie so many times that Bella has called that to his face at some point and been told she's not allowed to call him that. And she has to remind herself when she meets him not to call him Charlie. And it's kind of sad because not only is it like socially considered disrespectful, right? But it's also taken this form of endearment out of it, any association with her father. He's become this guy that she knows that's not like, it doesn't matter that he's her father, he's just this guy that she knows. And based on this idea that she's so familiar with him as not dad, but Charlie, and this idea that Bella feels like she's got to take care of her mother, and this idea that Bella is sacrificing so her mother can live her life, and her mother doesn't like really want her like to go, but she also wants to be able to go do her thing, and she's more willing to go do her thing. All of that tells me that Renee talks very freely to Bella about whatever she wants to talk to Bella about. And she's either too self-absorbed to care and know and understand at all that it's a problem, or that she truly she's heard it and she just doesn't think it's a big deal. She thinks that it's fine, right? That she can talk to her kid like she's a schoolmate and instead of a child. And I think Renee's probably always done what's been easiest for herself. She doesn't discourage Bella from calling Charlie Charlie. She tends to encourage it by going right along with it. And she calls him that in her head the entire first chapter. Never once do we hear dad unless it's coming out of her mouth directly to him. She says, I wasn't allowed to call him Charlie to his face at the top of page 6. And she doesn't even go on to say how she's feeling anything about it. She doesn't think further about her father after thinking about the idea that she has to call him dad. There's no explanation for it, just moving on to her thinking about her mom again and the fact that they had to scrape up money to buy her a new parka. And it makes me wonder, did she even like ask Charlie, like, hey, we need a coat? Because this is 2005, it's like $40. So they've got her a new wardrobe, which is scarce, and they had to scrape up the rest. Like, Bella had to pitch in to get her new parka, which, like, how much money is Bella sitting on that she can still buy a card, but her mother had to go broke to buy her a parka? I don't know. But Bella is a child, so I'm gonna give her that credit. But she's almost 18, like I think only a couple of months away from 18. So it's kind of sad to think that she wouldn't volunteer. But that's neither here nor there. And I don't know, it just leaves me that Bella and her mother both have this general distaste for Charlie as a parental figure, as an authority figure, and they both have Bella has an outright distaste for anything to do with this job, in my opinion, the way she talked about his car. And she definitely doesn't care about his feelings in general. She doesn't spare a thought for him. At this point, it's on par with her distaste for everything in F<applause>ก์. I feel like Renee, ultimately, I feel like Renee dropped the ball. And we won't know to the full extent of it, even if we read all the books. I don't necessarily believe that Renee can be blamed in general for Bella's shitty overall attitude and bratty internal dialogue, though. Because Bella doesn't give a fuck. She doesn't. And I'm going to tell you 4 times when she doesn't give a fuck. So the first time is on page 6. Charlie is telling her about Billy Black and how they used to go fishing together when she was younger. And he is in a wheelchair now, so he can't drive his truck, so he's selling it to her. Or to him so that he can have it for Bella, right? And it's a good truck, and it works, and it's great. It's just sad. You can tell by the way that Charlie says it that he's sad about it. And Bella does not spare a thought for either her father or her friends, her father's friends' emotional place, her father's emotional place. She literally does not even think, damn, that sucks. Like nothing. She literally is just like, what year is it? Asking about the truck. Okay, point 2, on page 12. This one makes me sad. So in the morning she wakes up, it's foggy. Remember those claustrophobic thoughts that we were talking about earlier? And she's talking about how the sky is the roof of a cage and Forszák is the huge cage, right? She has a quiet breakfast with Charlie. And after he leaves for work, she finds herself still sitting in the kitchen and she's looking at the yellow painted walls that 18 years ago, in an attempt to bring some sunshine into the house, her mother had painted. She looks at the yellow walls and she looks at the furniture and finally she settles on some photos on the mantle. One of Charlie and Renee on their wedding day, one of them at the hospital after Bella is born, and then Bella every year of school all the way up to current. And she's embarrassed and frustrated and she doesn't want those photos up. And it leaves me wondering, like, Bella, did you not pay attention to, like, anything in all the years that you came here? These pictures have been here forever. And it's kind of, like, selfish of her to want to take down these photos that they're all her dad has had until this point, right? But she's going to ask him anyway. But what really stands out is Bella's reaction to realizing that Charlie hadn't never gotten over her mom. She doesn't feel sad that her dad is still pining away for her mother. She doesn't feel upset that he might be hurting. She doesn't even pity him for not being able to move on. She just feels awkward. It's like he's not her dad. He's just this guy, Charlie, her mom used to date. And technically he's her father, but it's not like he's anyone important. And it just makes me sad, right? It's sad that she doesn't seem to care about him as much as he does about her. And he's just so happy to have her back in his life. So happy. It's sad. I'm sorry that my hands are in my face so much. I hope I didn't cover it up. You're gonna have to deal with it because I'm not filming this again. The third thing, right? So the first one is finding out he's in a wheelchair and not giving a shit. Second thing is finding out her dad is still like kind of stuck in the past and feeling awkward about it and nothing else. The third thing is when she's at school the first day and all the kids are talking to her in 4th period Spanish class and at lunch, she simply does not care. Like, Bella does not give a fuck. She says outright on page 17, "One girl sat next to me in both Trig and Spanish. I couldn't remember her name, so I smiled as she prattled about teachers and classes. I didn't even try to keep up." So just the word there, prattled, right? Prattled means, let's go to the dictionary, there they are. Prattle means idle or foolish and irrelevant talk. So she's already predisposed thinking that this friend that she's made is foolish, talking about things that are just foolish and irrelevant to her, even though it's about teachers and classes and things that are supposed to be relevant in her everyday life. She says, "I didn't try to keep up." We learn here that Bella is 5'4", so that we can see that she is much taller than her new friend, who's hair makes up the height difference between the two of them. It must be very curly. After being introduced to a group of people, she says, "I forgot all their names as soon as she spoke them." Now, for someone who just the night before, a scant probably 12 hours ago, was crying, watching the rain, sad about how she'll never fit in, and how she's always been different, it seems like she isn't trying to make any friends, right? And the final time that Bella doesn't give a fuck, which is about 2 pages and 20 minutes later in the story, after all the kids are asking her all these questions, is when she is sitting at lunch with the girl from Trig in Spanish, who, even though she hasn't been listening to anything this girl has said from the get, she asks her about the Too Pretty to Be Alive club, right? The Cullens. And on the next page, page 20, while she listens, she's actually watching the Cullens, specifically the youngest one with the bronze hair. And after getting their names and thinking about and learning that they all live together, she starts thinking about names and how old they are. And then bam, suddenly their old-fashioned names make her remember that not only is her friend next to her named Jessica, but it's such a plain and common name. There's even 2 Jessicas back in Phoenix, right? I don't know why these old-fashioned names made her think of that. It's very, very convenient, right? After she remembers Jessica's name, she decides to demand all of the tea, right? She wasn't interested in anyone at school or anything to do with school 2 minutes ago. It was all prattle. But now that the beautiful people have showed up, all she wants is all the hot gossip, right? That's all she wants. Bella does not care, not interestingly, about people as a whole. She's not a caring person in the first chapter anyway. I've heard that some people think that she is a caretaker. I don't really see it here. I see in the first chapter Bella just, in general, not being a great human, which shouldn't surprise me because it would lead me right into our next segment. So this is my idea that Clumsy Bella is a bad human, right? Now, this is it's one thing, but I've divided it into 2 because I'm tracking every time Bella gets physically clumsy because I think it's going to be hilarious. And I want to know how many times it happens and how frequently it happens. And I guess being a vampire probably cured her of her vitamin deficiency. Maybe. Who knows? But the first section is basically just my theory, and the second section is her tripping. And my theory is Bella is not cut out for this world of being a human. She's always been much better suited to life as a vampire. And these are my points. My first point is on page 10, when she is standing in front of the mirror, having a hard time at Foursquare's. It's raining outside. It's her first night there. She's just kind of tearing herself apart. Remember earlier, she's saying all the things that she's not. She's pointing out the things that she thinks that make her different, that nobody's gonna like about her. And she's focuses on the fact that at first, that she's unlikely to fit in anywhere at Foursquare's. Right? She says that she never fit in anywhere at Phoenix, which is a much larger school. And she muses at first that it's teenagers and that she doesn't get along with people her own age. But after a moment, she settles along with maybe the truth was that I didn't relate well to people, period. In fact, she feels closest to her mother than anyone in the whole world, and she feels that they're out of sync. And she says, I wondered if I was seeing the same things through my eyes that the rest of the world was seeing through theirs. Now, I believe that these things are hints about the fact that this is truly part of some I'm different foreshadowing that isn't the same as the whole I'm different from other girls, which she totally embodies. She reads books and she reads the classics. She doesn't read just regular old books. She doesn't do sports or cheerleading. She's sarcastic and nobody else is. She's clumsy instead of graceful, right? She's not great at being a human, right? So for the sake of her, Clumsy Bella's being a bad human, we're gonna talk about all the times that she fell, okay? Clumsy Bella can't do anything. She's apparently inept at walking. Through page 5 and 6, she stumbles off of the plane and Charlie has to instinctively catch her because he's so used to his daughter falling, and she's only with him for 30 days out of the year, or 2 weeks by this point for the last 3 years. 2 years, maybe. Depends, I don't know, I have to figure it out. I'll figure out her birthday at some point, maybe next book. On page 10, she reminisces on not having the hand-eye coordination to play sports without humiliating herself and hurting people. On page 17, she trips on her own boots. On page 23, she stumbles over a book in the walkway while she's staring at Edward, who is staring at her with hate in his eyes. That's when they first are in bio together. And on page 26, she watches volleyball instead of participating, thinking about injuries she was the cause of that actually make her nauseous. Her injuries and other people's injuries. So I'm going to be on the lookout for stuff to add to the Clumsy Bella's a Bad Human list. And I will see what we've got next time. Right now, these are just the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 examples of Bella being clumsy, right? And I'm gonna also talk right now about some good parenting for a minute. It's a kind of short subject because Charlie's just showing the fuck up as dad for this chapter. On the first page, he's happy and completely open to Bella coming to visit him. I've said this before, even though he's more than a little confused. He knows that she hates Foursquare and doesn't understand, but he also doesn't grill her about it. The opportunities that he has to grill her about why she's there, he doesn't take. Instead, on her arrival, she's been registered for high school. Everything's ready to go. He's helping her get a car. What he does end up finding her a car that he jumps the gun and buys right off. She thanks him and he says, "I don't mind. I just want you happy here," which is so true. Charlie is just happy to have his daughter back, and I think it's sweet. Now, I'm going to shift gears here for a minute and talk about some writing choices that I would have not done, that I would have made differently as we kind of wind down to the end of the video here. So there's only a couple of things, right? Mainly there is two main things that she did in this section that I would have done differently. And one of them is actually for each. So the first one is about the preface. I think she should have included it in the body of the book. I don't believe it's actually there. Don't remember it being there. And I don't think it does anything up front to help us know anything. It didn't make me care anymore about Bella. Any care that I had completely fell away as she bitched her way about the car, right? Which I'll talk about in a second. I didn't remember how ready she was to die. She's pretty fucking ready. So the other thing is the big thing, the thing that annoys me the most about it, is this car. Okay, so on page 5, there's one mention of Bella expecting to pay for the vehicle. But she also mentions the scarcity of funds. And so the very first part of it is why she wants to buy a car, despite her funds. And then she goes on to explain to us why she wants to buy a car. But the arrangement of it is different. So let's look at it. It says, "My primary motivation for buying a car, despite the scarcity of my funds, was that I refused to be driven around in a town in a car with red and blue lights on top. Nothing slows down traffic like a cop." Now, there's a couple of things that frustrated me. The idea is legitimate. Cops bring attention, and she definitely does not want more attention as the new girl than she's going to get. Everybody already knows she's the chief's cop, the chief of police's daughter. She's back in town. She hasn't ever been here before. Nobody's ever seen her. Who is she, right? Everybody already knows that, so she doesn't want any more attention. And people do indeed slow down whenever they see cops, right? It must take them forever to get anywhere. But the key information here is she wants a car and she can't afford it, right? But she buries it in her complaint about the lights and the slow. So in my opinion, she should have started out more organically. They're in the cruiser, they're driving, it's taking forever to get places because every time they build up some speed, somebody notices that he's a cop. She comments about how she hates it, and she's always hated it. And she says out loud, "This is why I want my own car." And then we get some communication between her and Charlie, and he can say, well, that's the thing. Even though we know, it's just hard because she wants us to remember that she wants a car and she doesn't have enough money for it. But the way she writes it and the way that she implies and she knows that she can't afford it doesn't lend well to later when she begins to critique the car that her father has found. So Charlie brings up this car he's found for Bella, right? And she's suspicious right off the get. Now, from the previous sentence, I didn't remember her wanting a car and not having enough money for it. I just remembered her not wanting to be driven around in the police car, right? So immediately she's suspicious. Which is a little merited because he does get sketchy about the age of the truck. But instead of being excited about something that he may have found, she chooses to jump on his wording where he says he might have found the right car for her. She doesn't like the for her. Immediately it gets her hackles up. And I'm over here thinking, girl, he just talked about finding a car for you. And you're looking for a car. And you know you can't afford a car. And you know your dad's not going to bring you anything that you can't afford. So if he says he's finding one, why are you acting so grateful about how old it is? Right? And she finds out that it's pretty old. It's from like the 50s or the 60s, but it's in really, really great condition. And she's complaining about how she doesn't want to be him driving her places. And she knows that he's willing to help her getting a car that she can't afford, but she's still going to complain about it. Even when she finds out how old it is, she complains about having to get a mechanic when it inevitably breaks, which is interesting because there's only one time when it doesn't run. And that's for whole different reasons. We won't talk about that right now. But instead of being out here like, wow, Dad, thanks for looking for a car. Thanks for finding a car for me. She's all like, meh, and bratty. It's annoying, right? But then she's grilling him and she's grilling him. And finally he confesses that like, well, you know, I already got it for you. And once she realizes that it's free, she brings it up again, that the reminder that she doesn't have to pay for it. Then we're like, okay, I guess if she was expecting to pay more for it, I understand why she would be asking him all that. But the problem is that we're left now, because she didn't make it clear that she really fully expected to pay for the whole car, we're left with this like bad taste in our mouth about Bella's bratty, ungrateful attitude. Or at least I was. It left me irritated at her. When I could have been annoyed with her that the traffic was slow, anxious about what this car was like, but hopeful, and still a little worried because I knew I didn't have enough money for it, right? Instead, we just end up rolling our eyes at her and thinking that she's ungrateful, and we're supposed to like Bella. I want to like Bella. And right now, I guess I don't. I don't know. We'll see. So that's it for the bad writing things. That's all I could find is those two things. Don't make the preface. Prefaces and prologues are generally unhelpful in my opinion. I want to get right into the story. Tell me that at some point in the story, instead of like telling me ahead of time, which is a weird, it's like an excerpt, it feels like. I think I remember it being an excerpt. And the car thing, just make it clear. Don't make me dislike Bella for her having legitimate feelings that I'm not fully aware of. Because I'm in her head. I should be fully aware of all these things. But let's move on to the stuff that I love. All right.
One of the best things about Charlie, he doesn't hover.
It's the end. I told you I would tell you the things that I love about it. Let's start with quotes and exact happenings, right? So the very first one is, Charlie is great, right? And the very first line is about him, and it says, one of the best things about Charlie is he doesn't hover, which is, I loved it. I love it writing it. I love it now. I loved it when I read it the first time. She's got this long, huge day that just happened. And to cap it off, she's got this new truck and all this excitement and all this energy and all this leaving behind and all this grief. She just needs peace. And since Charlie doesn't hover, he gives it to her. And that is so relatable for, I think, anybody who ever wanted peace. The second thing is that Bella is a voracious reader. Is that the right way? How do you say it? Voracious? Vicarious? Both? She does both. She reads a lot. But the only thing we really see that she's read is the originals. The originals isn't the right word. The classics. A list curated mostly by old white men. If you're looking for something that's a classic that's not, I suggest Passing by Nella Larson. Great story. Wonderful story. Give it a good look. But when I was in high school and we would do the literature portion of class and I would pay attention to the literature book, and then we moved to the grammar portion of class and I would read while everybody was doing grammar from the literature book, the parts that we hadn't read yet, so that I could learn more stories and do more things. I just kind of like leaned on my natural talent to pull me through. And it can't have been that bad, right? Like, I wrote this whole thing and it's like 6,000 words, and I grew up on 80s and 90s bodice rippers, so it can't be that bad, right? Yeah. My third favorite thing is that Bella fails miserably at getting her sarcastic tone across to Eric. He thinks that she should be more tan, and he makes a comment and she doesn't appreciate it, so she says that her mother is albino, and instead of him like catching the sarcasm, he just stares at her to try to figure out like why she doesn't have white hair. And I think it's funny. The number 4th line that I absolutely loved and adored was, inconspicuously, I sniffed my hair. It smelled like strawberries, the scent of my favorite shampoo. And girl, don't you know, I bought strawberry shampoo and conditioner, the like cheap VO5 stuff, to see if I liked it before I spent like $6 on a bottle of it. And I hated it. I smelled like fucking food all day long, and I don't like smelling like food. Food smells belong on food, not on people. Just like food colors belong on food, not on people, right? But it was great for the fanfic girlies. It was perfect for them and everything that they ever wanted. And last but not least, because these are in chronological order, number 5 is Mike being hilariously adorable with, so did you stab Edward Cullen with a pencil or what? Funny. Hilarious. Silly, silly, silly. Well, that's it. That's all I got. I had a great time. I really feel like, as far as chapter 1 goes, Bella is not having a good time in Fåṟk, and this is probably proving to her every reason that she never wanted to come here ever in the first place. And I wouldn't be surprised if she cried herself to sleep at night when she went to sleep. I don't have any predictions because I've read the book before, so I don't know what's going to happen, but I also don't remember. So I know what's going to happen, but I also don't remember exactly what's going to happen. I just feel bad for her, and irritated at Edward was how I felt back then, and kind of now too. I know why he's doing it, but it's still weird. So what do you think? How did I do? I hope I did well. I hope I hit the nail on the head. I hope I didn't miss and hit my thumb. If I did, tell me that. If you have the book or you have access to the book, go reread the first chapter. Keep my thoughts in mind. Come back here. Before you leave, tell me you're going to do it. Come back and tell me what you thought, right? If you have read it or you went and read it earlier, come back and tell me what you thought. Just let's have a conversation. I'd love to do that. I tried my best to be articulate so that we could I could really get my points across, and I tried to see all of the different sides of it. And I appreciate you here listening with me and having conversations and letting me ramble. So I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye!